What is up? How's it going? Okay. I think I should jump in first to my ideas and the reference that I started with when I first conceptualizing this idea. I wanted these two astronauts to be the same characters that I used last time. But last time I had made the models myself, so they weren't particularly high poly enough. They look like 2D PlayStation 2 characters. So I went out and bought these from, I think it was CGTrader. And I'll put a link down below where I got those and who made those. But I took that model and I changed the material for it to match like the two characters. So one would be blue and the other would be like yellow. Because I think the original texture was like this silvery, like astronaut-y, white and gray kind of vibe. I took a lot of inspiration from old sci-fi book covers. A lot of those are so beautiful. Like they're always has such great composition, and the color's so beautiful. And I started to fall in love with the astronauts in some of these compositions, some of these art pieces. And that's where the idea of these two guys came from, and their contrasting uniforms. And I wanted to keep them both, similar, but have different things about them so that they could be two separate characters. To give both characters their own uniqueness, but also keep them similar, So a big thing is, the color, but also in the helmet. I made this guy have this kind of retro stripes down his head, and this guy, these cool little antennas popping out of his head. So I started to think of what could these astronauts be looking out to sea? And then I thought of, whoa, if it's a train, if this vehicle is a train, then why don't I have robbers robbing the train? Much like, classic Western train robber kind of scenario. That was where my head was going. How the story goes is that the enemies fly up into window view, and we see them point at the ship at them. One of them notices it, and we leave with the bullet about to exit the gun, and have this kind of climax or cliffhanger at the end, So I started with that and kind of worked my way outwards from the window, adding the character on the side here, like the passengers, this guy, and adding her back here. Because originally I had him or her here, him here, so 4 people in the front, but it just seemed too symmetrical. I wanted to break it up, give it a little asymmetric, so that you'd be able to focus on things clearer, I think. I just didn't like the way it looked. So I put her back here, adding this little background element, and put his little backpack right on the seat so that you could see it front and center as he loads up his stuff. Well, I couldn't start the animating and figuring out the motion of everything without a little reference. So I cooked up this little bad guy, filmed myself doing all the different things that I wanted everybody to do, and I composited it together so I could put it in there with my project and reference it with the motion. And since I was having to hand animate everybody and not, use a mocap suit or something like that. And then after I, roughed out the animation for those 2 guys, I added the 3rd guy because couldn't really see him if I put him here with it. I easily could have just watched the video, but it just gives me better reference for what's going on. Yeah. Yes, I can put these two side by side together, so you can see kind of where I ended up with, what I started with and where I ended up. So moving on to more of the animation, I want to talk about the interior and how I kind of did all the little wiggling and jiggling and dynamic fabric sims. So yeah. So this was my kind of first time doing wind with cloth. I first did a dynamic sim on this cloth, which is really easy. You know, you just go in here, add a cloth sim. I parented the tops of them to a hook. I pinned off the tops of the cloth so it doesn't, fall down. And then, I just tweak some of that physics stuff, and then I add a force field. Wind force field and point it in the direction that I want it to blow, and it just kind of blows it, which is really, really cool. So all this wire thing was the wiggle bone add-on that you just click on, and it does a wiggle. It doesn't do a wiggle if the thing that it's parented to isn't moving. So if the ship was just sitting still, it wouldn't just auto do a wiggle. So to get it to wiggle, I added a noise to a keyframe of the ship moving, so that it gives it a little, ship moving jiggle. These little things attached to the wire is just another wiggle bone that's then parented to these guys, so it has a chain reaction of wiggle. So wiggle, 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 wiggle everywhere, wiggle here, wiggle there, wiggle, wiggle. This third thing is these like wiry grate stuff. It's supposed to be like metal chain link that kind of like dangles from the ship. And this was kind of my first time messing with soft body physics. I pinned some of these to one of the pinning groups with vertex groups. Made a vertex group of some of these lines. Kind of keeps it in shape. I have no idea. I just kind of messed with stuff until it looked cool. So most of these characters are hand animated, except for this guy. I used a Mixamo animation, one of their Mixamo library animations of some guy pointing, and then as you see, there's a bunch more little jiggly stuff. Jiggle, jiggle. So I think I'll move on to modeling and texturing. For most of this, I used image textures from imagetextures.com and kind of built from each one. Like this was a picture I found and just kind of extruded, duplicated it, reversed it. I also used some of Quixel Bridge's materials, much like for things like large surface areas for like metal here too, and some of these wall bits, because I wanted a higher res texture that was kind of repeating. I could cover a whole surface area, and they worked amazingly well, just to get a nice looking texture that I could just slap on there and call it good. Because most of this cabin was in the dark anyways, so I didn't need it to be insanely detailed to the point where you'd be able to see everything. Like if you come in close on this stuff, like that's just a couple polygons, that's just one little thing. And I don't know if I think I got the fabric from Quixel too. So for this little part, I did a little bit of animating plus texturing. So I created a little text document or text PNG in Photoshop, brought it in here, put the UV coordinates of where I wanted each little text to go accordingly, and then I animated the UV of just this little spot to move in the X location exponentially. So it just keeps going and going. Just keeps moving and moving. And I had to make 2 different materials. That way one wasn't moving and one was. And for that material, it's just, the white text going through a RGB mix, using some color ramps to change the white to yellow, and then adding a emission to make it glow. And bada bing, bada boom. You got some moving text. Ooh. Oh, and some little scan lines. I mixed. That's what this other thing was. So I mixed a wave texture that was just lines, moved it up and down. Boom, scan lines. So this object here was the only object that I made that I actually took it through the whole PBR workflow. And if you don't know what that is, it's the workflow that that games and stuff take their objects through to texture it, model it, and get it game ready for film or games and stuff like that. Anyways, but what the idea is that you model out a high poly model. You take that model, you make a low res version of it, which is what is here, as you can see. You take that, you take those two, you bake the high res onto the low res model. So you're baking all the high poly stuff into a little map, a normal map that you could then put onto the low res model, and it still looks high res, but it's a lot lighter weight. So I took it through that. I took it through Substance Painter, where I textured it. As you can see, all the little dirt and bump on these little lines here in the glass. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Because damn, look at that. Oh, crisp, clean. Ooh, yes. And Substance, it's like Photoshop for 3D texturing. It's amazing. It has all these different generated algorithm edge wear stuff that it just like conforms to the position of where every edge is and crevice and occlusion, so that you can put all this dirt and stuff in. It's just great. Yeah, so I took this object through that. That was the only one that I actually did that for, because I knew I wanted to do that for at least one object. So yeah, this is their backpack, the astronaut backpacks. This is astronaut 2, and the other one has a 1 on it. Yeah. So for the characters, the alien characters, for his body, I took a poly, was it poly? It was a 3D scan from Ian Hubert's Astronauts, just one of the bodies, because I didn't want to have to make a whole body, but I also wanted it to look high res, but also a space alien. So yeah, it was the perfect little combination. So I just kind of kit bashed the character in a sense, but I did model this guy's face. That was a lot of fun. It was the first time modeling a humanoid face, and adding animation rigging to it so that I could close his eyes. Here, let me take this off. Yeah, I could open and close his eyes, open his mouth. Blech. Do some eyebrow action. And smile. Look at that beautiful smile. I actually did do a Substance Painter for the skin for this. I forgot about that. To get the nice bumps on his nose and all these little freckles and pores and stuff. Same goes for her face. Wow, she's really oily. Must have changed that earlier. Yeah, maybe she's a oily alien, One other fun little thing was modeling these cameras and this little guy. Yeah, I added some little wiggle bones to the hoses here. These wiggle bones, so that way when the ship moves and he opens it up, the wires kind of wiggle. And all that is this is a curve that I added geometry to through here. The depth. It's made with 3 different vertices. And this vertex here is hooked to an object, which you do by going into an object, finding the vertex, hitting Control H, and then you hook to a new object or selected object. If you do a new object, it'll make a new. And then you can grab it on the outside world. Then it's simply just binding this to a bone so that it moves. And then I add wiggle bone to that so that it just kind of so it wiggles. That's just a little trick to make wiggling wires without having to make physics-based cloth wires, and that's just a whole mess. Also added a cool little bone here that I could grab and pull out with one easy swoop to add a little tape deck recording thing to put his little tape in. Yeah. This little camera was pretty unique. I had to, in order to make the screen, I had to first put a camera on the front of the camera, render out a pass of what it saw after I parented the camera to the mesh camera so that it would follow the movement. I rendered that out. Then I took that movie and put it on the mesh as a material. I mixed it with the same kind of scan lines that I did for the little top thing. This little guy, kind of to add that cool little green film. And that was it. The problem I had with this was when I made the final render, this was messed up. It was like moving. It was glitched up. It's the worst. So I had to scrap the render, find the problem. I had to re-render the animation for this because I guess I had rewritten over the file or something. I don't know. That doesn't matter. So that's how I did that. So I also added some bones to a little thing, visor, viewfinder, so that he could open it and close it without it clipping through anything. And I could just easily go boop, boop, boop. Super easy. So that leads me to the rigs. I wanted to keep the rigs simple in the sense that I didn't have to make crazy custom rigs, so I just used Rigify on all the characters. And that's simply just using the Rigify add-on that's inside Blender already. You just search Rigify, click it, and then you can use the armature in Human Meta Rig. It's got all the functions for IK, and if you scale the fingers, they curl. Alright, so now we shall move on to lighting. With my lighting setup, I went for kind of a dimly lit interior with the really bright background where the sun is coming, like high noon kind of thing. And you can even see it here. I have a little chugging. I have a little sunlight here. Sun skylight. I have a little skylight there. Comes out so you can get some cool little shadows of the little tea grate. I also added some little lights here so you could see the detail of some of the interior. Added like some blue light, greenish light here to light her up, and light some of this up. There's a little area light here to illuminate him a little bit more so that you can see the detail in all of his like clothing and stuff, and draw the eye towards him so that we focus on him more since he's doing all this little motion. And just, stylistically it looks nice. And I think there's a little bit of lighting here because you could fake some bounce lighting since I am using Eevee. I can add point lights, really dim point lights to, like, if some area is too dark, kind of draw it out, kind of sculpt the scene with the lighting, because not everything needs to be like accurate in terms of like how things would be lit. You can always add, like, even this here. This is supposed to be like the bounce light of, the skylight, because his helmet was just really dark and I really wanted to light it up. I think that should also lead me to rendering. I love to render in Eevee. A lot of people don't. A lot of people like Cycles. Cycles is amazing. It has beautiful things that you don't have to do necessarily when you turn it on. Like with Cycles, you just turn it on and it does what you need it to do. With Eevee, you gotta do all these little checkboxes and all these different little settings to get it to look, the way you want it to in terms of realistic lighting. Some of the things I did: ambient occlusion, bloom, the basics, screen space reflections, motion blur, blah 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 blah. Shadows. I bumped the cube size map up because if you have it like really low, as you can see, the shadows are like blurrier. They don't have. It's not you don't have as much resolution to them. The biggest thing is baked lighting. So you can use these things, if you haven't heard of, called iridescent volumes. And with these, you size them out to the space that you want them to bake, where you want the lighting to be baked, and you set the resolution accordingly. So this is the settings for that I did, and each one of these little dots will go out and bake the light. It's like, I'm not too sure on the math, but each one of these little things, is like a little probe that looks for the lighting and bakes it down. So the more you have, the higher resolution that you're going to get out of the lighting that's going in the scene. So I have one of those. I also have reflection cube map, and this just gives reflections actual reflections, because in Eevee it just kind of fakes it. You can really see it with his helmet. Here you kind of see his arm here, and this is the screen that's shining back up at him. So having those helps a lot, and also it really helps and looks amazing. You can also change the size on that. And so I love Eevee. I use Eevee. Maybe I'll start using Cycles, but as of right now, Eevee looks amazing, and it's really fast, and I don't want to wait a month for a render to happen. So I use Eevee. That's just me. You can use what you want. It don't matter. As long as you're creating something, and creating something cool, So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. Maybe you wanted to just figure out how this was broken down, or you just saw this video and were like, hey, I'll watch that for the next however many minutes, I got time to blow. Either way, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you made it to the end. Hopefully this was informative. If y'all have any other questions, if y'all want me to dive in deeper into something, let me know in the comments. Put a comment down there, and then I'll think of what to do next for the next video. But yeah, I think this was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to, break this down and think about my process and what I did to get here. Just nice self-reflecting, Anyways, I hope y'all have a good day. Peace.